All right, so I'm ready to show my little application and demo how it works. So basically, all it is I made my phone is a tracker. I can create trips, and let's say I create today I'm going to be going to Maine and back. I create trip number blah, and I call it main trip. And as I travel, now I have an auto record, so it keeps on. As soon as it finds a GPS location, it will hold it and track my trip. When I close the app, sends everything back to my house, and I can view it. So I can view my trips. So the Android app is as follows. Oh, actually, first thing it does is it tries to connect home, and it looks like I need to do something real quick. So first of all, I need to be on this port. So I'm using IIS, and I'm hosting this website on IIS, and I'm behind two routers, so I'm doing some port forwarding. Let's see. All right, now I have I'm on the right port because I'm using a dedicated port for Ethernet. I have my IIS site here, and yeah, it's basically live. I just hid the port. It's not port 80, I think. Oh boy, it's 8080. Anyways, but you still need my my IP address. Oh, and the other cool thing is since I don't have a static IP, I have written a C# program that I put on a schedule, and basically every day it'll send me an email telling me what my IP address is. Should I really show it? But yeah, in case I don't have a connection to my API at home, it'll probably be because I don't have the right IP, and I can just check my Gmail and put my IP in there. So my app has just connected. What it does is it connects to my API at home. Here's the front end of the API, well, the middle tier of the API. It uses this this function to get all trips. Or which one is it? Get all trips. Anyways, it does an HTTP connection, gets all trips. My API is set up in the following way. It's a 3-tier application. The bottom is my API. The top is the data. So what that does, I made a connection to my database, my SQL database, where I keep trips and GPSM, GPS messages. See, GPS messages have an ID, a title, a body, latitude, longitude, which are strings. I had to make a little conversion to doubles in order to show them to the map. And the foreign key, which is a trip ID, so that each GPS coordinate is connected to a certain trip. Here's my database. So let's look at trips, for example. I have 4 trips recorded so far. They have a trip ID. And the GPSMs, the GPS messages, are all of these guys. And as you can see, this is trip 1. I looked at the first 200, so let's look at all of them. Let's look at the top 1,000. You'll see that each trip has an ID and a foreign key, which is the trip ID, which is the trip they belong to. So let's look at, yeah, see these points are connected to trip 2. These are to trip 1. Anyways, so when the app turns on, it makes a connection to my house and recreates this database internally. I'm not holding anything in the phone. That way I don't have to manage new points that are on the phone but not on the server, or vice versa. Every time I turn on the app, I get a fresh image of what's going on in my database. I can add a location. So I select an existing trip. I have 4 trips. I can add a location to my trip number 3. I would add a title and a body, and here's my GPS location right now, and I would click save location, and that would be saved to said trip. Or the coolest part is I can select a trip or make a new trip and then automate. So every few minutes it will hold a new GPS location and assign it to a certain trip. I can also map the previous trips. So this was trip number 1, which had a bunch of coordinates, because this was actually a bunch of trips. Before I had my points broken up by trips, I had just one database with all of my points. So this is all the points. Later on, I made different trips. So let's see, trip number 4 was a little walk ahead with my wife earlier this week. Map this trip, and here it is. It's a little trip, little walk. So as I enter new locations or automatically hold locations, when I close the app or click save, it will send all that data to my database via the API. So the first tier, like I said, was, let me see if I can see the screen, cool. The first tier is my data tier. Second tier is the middle tier, which has my services. This is how I access the database. I have an interface which has a few functions. This is user ID. This is MGPS service and MGPS interface. I can get all trips. I can get trip by ID. I can get a single position by trip ID and position ID. Always, and I can get, I needed to get max number of GPS IDs and max number of trips, because let's say I had trip 1, 2, 3, and I were to delete trip 1, 2, 3, 4. I were to delete trip 2, right? The next trip should be number 5. So I look at the highest number, which is now 4, and I add 1 to it. That's why I needed this to give correct IDs to my trips. And so I implement, so I'm using EF, it's the entity framework. Blah, 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 GPS service, let's look at that. This is where I implement all of these functions from, as dictated by the interface that I'm inheriting. And there we go. We can add trips. We can save. I don't have a delete trips yet. I don't really want to manage the trips from my phone. Yeah, I don't want to do that. Yeah, so I'll do that. I might do that later. Who knows? And then I have my last tier, which is both a web API and a web page. If I look at my route config for my my web pages. So I have a controller, and so I have 2 controllers, one for the API and one for the web page. So this is my, let me look at controllers. API controller has all of these functions like get count and get trip, get GPSM ID, get all of these things. And I have my map controller, which has only 2 functions, a get and a post. So let's see what that looks like when, right now it's not deployed. All right, so obviously this was the get, and it gives me a 1 position in Boston. It's a default position. But then I can select, see the same trips I had on my phone. If I select this walk and I map it, boom, I have that trip, and I can map any other trip. So if I were to make a new trip, I have just 2 points here. If I were to make a new trip, well then, if I were to make a new trip, you would see it down here, and yeah, that's what it is. So I can, I used the Google Maps on Android, and I use the same Google Map API for an actual page in the browser. Had to get API keys and all that good stuff. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Now I probably want to make this looking a little better. You're never really done with a project, so I don't know how far I'm gonna take this one. I just wanted to see map trip, which is trip 3. It's this guy. Map this trip. Yeah, there we go. It's the same one. All right, well, that is it for now. Thank you for watching.